Hey, everybody, it's Gray again. It's another edition of Unbreakable, the podcast. It is Thursday morning, bright and early. It's June the 19th, and we have a movie classic. A movie classic we're going to talk about. So sit back and relax or listen to me, whatever you're doing. You're going to love this movie classic. It's so appropriate for this time of the year. You know, today is the last full day of spring. Goodbye, spring. Hello, summer. Summer starts tomorrow. And I tell you what, this is a summer kind of movie we're going to talk about. And it's one of my personal favorites. In fact, I have it in my personal collection. And here it is. Now, listen, you'll know this movie just by the song that I'm going to sing. You ready? Two notes. Yes, it's Jaws. Jaws, as we say around Philadelphia, Jaws. Or as they say down south, Jows. Jows. Look at that. Jaws. Oh my God, what a thriller. Oh my God, I have so many memories about Jaws. We're going to talk about that right now. You know, tomorrow's June 20th. It will be 50 years to the date that Jaws came out. Jaws came out June the 20th, 1975. 50 years to the day. What I'm telling you, know the movie. It's about this giant great white shark, like 20 feet long, that terrorizes this New England shore community. Eats a lot of people on the way and just terrifies. It's around the 4th of July. These places up there, that's when they make their money. The beaches are open and the hotels are filled. And you don't want to shut your beaches down around the 4th of July. So it's the mayor of this little town. He's a real scoundrel. And he's like, well, the police chief, Brody, that comes with the shark expert, Hooper, and with the really Quint, remember Quint, played by Robert Shaw, the shark expert. And they all tell the mayor, you've got to shut down the beaches. It's like feeding time out there. Like the shark has whatever his choice is. And the mayor said, I can't do that because it's the 4th of July. You know how much money we're going to lose? Until, the end of it. We know. The guys get in the boat, they go hunt for the shark. And then for like the last section of the movie is the fun part when they go out hunting for the shark and the shark comes back at them. And I don't want to give it away if you're like the one person in this entire world that has never seen Jaws before. But what a great movie. All right, so you know what? Because I'm old, I'm 118 years old. I am wear my reading glasses when we talk about this, okay? So here we go. Yes, I can see you now. All right, so Jaws, 50th anniversary. 100%, no, 97, it's 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. There's always that one troublemaker on there, one black sheep who said, I didn't think it was a good movie. It's 97%, that's damn good. It's based on a novel written by Peter Benchley, wrote the novel back in like 1973. Very, very popular novel back then, but very different, as we're going to find out from the movie. Very different. So Spielberg, 26 years old, Steven freaking Spielberg, his first real movie that he directs. He had somebody, he did a TV movie. You remember Sugarland Express, I think, and another movie called Duel, between trucks on the road who kind of cut each other off and stuff. But this was really, Jaws was really his first real big time movie that he directed. And along with the fact that he directed a fantastic, thrilling, action packed movie, Jaws will always be known as a really, really one of the toughest movies they ever made. And we're going to talk about that. But think about it. Spielberg was only 26 years old. He gets handed the car keys to this big production, this big movie. And it's like, can he pull it off? Um, so the movie had a budget of $9 million, which when you think about 1975, 1974, that's a lot of money. $9 million. It made, get this, my friends, Jaws made $476.5 million. What an investment. Oh my God. From 9 million to over 400 million. Unbelievable. Most of we do this for the Martha's Vineyard, which is up in Massachusetts. And some of the movie was filmed in Hollywood, but most of it was on location. And it was filmed between May 1974 and September. And get this, the movie, the budget only allowed for 55 days of filming. Guess what? The movie went over. It took 159 days to film the damn thing, right? So Spielberg was saying, oh my God, this is the first and the last movie I'm ever going to direct. Nobody goes over budget like I did, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he was really worried about this. Most of the movie's problems, as we're going to talk about, was because of the mechanical sharks. They had 3 mechanical sharks, and they kept breaking down all the time. They looked kind of foamy, they were breaking down. Actually, the fact that the sharks broke down was good in the long run for the movie, because Spielberg decided he was going to take more like an Alfred Hitchcock view of Jaws. He's not really going to show the shark until later in the movie. So you're wondering with the music that it's like a mystery. What is it? How big is the shark? What does it look like? But really, the original script had the shark showing up a lot sooner than it did. But because of all the problems on location with Jaws, especially the fake sharks breaking down, it kind of forced Spielberg's hand that we really can't show the shark until later in the movie. There was a lot of tie-in merchandise with this movie. I mean, everything was sharp. If you saw the movie in 1975, everything revolved around Jaws. I mean, you had lunch boxes, and you had all kinds of things, games, toys, everything they could plaster the shark logo on. They did it. And of course, this was the famous logo. The shark rising up and killing the lady. There you go. But the merchandising was phenomenal for this movie. And Jaws broke a lot of ground in a lot of different ways. Not only was it really one of the first summer blockbusters ever, not only was it a tough shoot, it took longer than they thought, but as far as merchandising and marketing and PR, there was nothing like it. And Jaws set the standard, because only 2 years later, he had Star Wars coming out. And then you had other summer blockbusters into the 80s and stuff. Yeah, so Jaws was really really the first one that set the precedent. Okay, what else about Jules? Yes, as we said, um, it was the first blockbuster movie ever. Summertime used to be known as a time when you put a lot of your bad movies out, B movies, what they used to call popcorn movies. You go, the movies that make no sense, like Godzilla, but you go with your date to see Godzilla, and you have popcorn, and that's that. Yeah, it's a date out. Summertime, people are away on vacation. Who has time to go to movies, right? Jaws changed the whole thing. After Jaws, studios wanted to put their big movies and the action-packed movies out during the summertime. It changed the whole thing. Um, in 2001, um, the movie Jaws was preserved by the National Registry, the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. They finally, I don't know what took them so long, 26 years, decided that Jaws was a movie to be preserved. An iconic movie. So 2001, it was. And it, you know how it started out, right? Peter Benchley uh, wrote the novel, Jaws. And there was a little excerpt from the movie in Cosmopolitan magazine. A little excerpt from the novel, sorry. Cosmo. Yeah, you go on in there and you're looking at Burt Reynolds covering his privates there, and then shoot. Well, then you look, and there in Cosmo magazine, you've got a little excerpt from the novel. Well, guess what? Hollywood producers saw, read the little blurb, and said, "Oh my God, we gotta make a movie out of this. This is great." And that's how it came to be. That's how they decided to make a movie. So they got in touch with Benchley. Eventually, they bought the rights from him, but in doing so, they promised him a role in the movie. And if you watch Jaws, Peter Benchley, the guy who wrote the book, is one of the reporters in one of the scenes when all hell breaks loose on Amity Island. And but it was a very interesting relationship Spielberg had with Benchley. I mean, there was a lot of things in the movie that weren't in the novel and vice versa. In fact, in the novel, Benchley had a subplot, not only the shark, but Hooper, who is the young scientist played by Richard Dreyfuss, uh, coming to help kill the shark, find the shark. Um, he was having a love affair with Chief Brody's wife. It was like a soap opera kind of thing, you know. And Spielberg said, no, we're not having that crap. I really want to focus the movie on the shark, how to catch the shark, kill the shark, blah, 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 none of this other nonsense. So really, the first 2/3 of Benchley's novel, they took out or they changed around, you know. Pretty much the last part of Benchley's novel, maybe like the last 150 pages, they kept. They pretty much kept that intact because that was the exciting part. The last 150 pages of Benchley's novel had to do with the shark hunt, where they finally get in the boat and go looking for Jaws. Excuse me. Cheers. Okay, now more Jaws stuff. It's a lot of trivia on Jaws. And now that it's coming out to 50th anniversary, they're re-releasing the movie on widescreen. My recommendation, go see it. Even though you know the ending, you know what's going to happen. Go see Jaws on the big screen. There's nothing like it, right? It's just, and you're really introducing the movie to a whole new generation of moviegoers. Think about all these little kids. It might be a little too intense for little kids, though, yeah. But think about the teenagers now, or people born around 2000 who are like 25, who weren't around during uh, the mania of Jaws back in 1975. Go to see the movie now. It's coming out on big screen, and you'll see it. You'll see a little bit about the craziness that went on about this movie in the mid 70s. Originally, Steven Spielberg was going to back out and directing the movie. He was very excited about doing the movie. He read the novel. He read the excerpt in Cosmo magazine. And he said, yeah, I'd love to do this. But he wasn't sure. He was getting cold feet. He wasn't sure about how to make it because he knew it was going to be really tough in the water. And being inexperienced as he was, he sort of was getting cold feet about directing the movie. He was finally convinced to go ahead and give it a go. But he almost backed out. A lot of these actors that were the main actors that were going to be in Jaws weren't in Jaws. They didn't want to be in Jaws, or they almost got cut. We're going to talk about that too. Very interesting. There were eventually did 3 drafts. He wasn't a screenwriter, but he did Spielberg a favor, and he did 3 different drafts on the screenplay of Jaws, and it still wasn't like they wanted. Spielberg wanted the movie to have some humor with it, to kind of offset the darkness, and the thrills and the shock. He didn't want it to be all depressing. Shark kills this person. Shark. No. So what he did was he called up one of his friends named Carl Gottlieb, who was actually, get this, he was a comedian, comic writer. He wrote for The Odd Couple. Remember The Odd Couple on TV, Channel 6, ABC, with Tony Randall and Jack Klugman? One of the writers on that show also did the screenplay for Jaws. Who would have thunk it, right? So they took Benchley's his first screenplays. They kept some of that, but Gottlieb got in there, kind of rewrote the whole thing again, put a lot more humor in it, and that's what they went with. Gottlieb and Spielberg had a big hand in it too, as far as the screenplay. Spielberg wanted, like, how Chief Brody is the chief on the island, but he's afraid of water. That was sort of like a running gag through the movie. Well, what the hell? You're afraid of water? What are you doing here on the island? Yeah. What are you doing near water if you're afraid of water? That was one of the ironies that Spielberg wanted to get in the movie, to kind of lighten it up a little bit, Okay, so it took Gottlieb 9 weeks to rewrite the whole screenplay. And a lot of the movie, what they would do, some of it was improvised. And what they would do the night before, the cast, the crew, Spielberg, the writers would all get together every night and have dinner together. And at that dinner, they would talk about the next day's shooting. They would go, whatever kind of dialogue around the dinner table, that's what they went with the next day. A lot of Jaws was off the cuff, in other words. As Richard Dreyfuss said later on, he said, we had a movie, but we really didn't have the actors until the last minute. We didn't have the shark till the last minute, and we didn't have the dialogue until the last minute. A lot of the dialogue, my friends, in Jaws, including that big speech, the famous speech that Quint gives, like about the Indianapolis and all those brave soldiers in the water after the torpedo, and the sharks got most of them. That was just a brilliant, brilliant uh, piece of speech there by Robert Shaw. Um, a lot of that was improvised. Uh, you would think so, right? I mean, the dialogue in Jaws is tremendous, but a lot of it they just made up because there was a lot of uncertainty about the shoot. No movie had ever been made before on the ocean like Jaws. Most of your pirate movies, your movies about like Moby Dick, the whale thing. Uh, a lot of those movies were made in a Hollywood sound studio, a tanks of water. Jaws was the very first movie to be made on the ocean. And they knew they were going to run into some problems, but they never imagined the problems they would really run into. A lot of these guys, I mean, they got sunburned by the time they came back. They were on the ocean 12 hours a day in the Atlantic Ocean to film Jaws, especially the part where the boat goes looking for Jaws. 12 hours a day. And Spielberg said they really only got 4 hours worth of film. Why? Because every time they got out there, the shark wouldn't work, or different cables were too much salt water, and the cast and crew were getting sunburned. There was always something. Guys were getting seasick. Oh my God, this thing was like plagued. So it really took a long, long time. Okay, what else? Oh, yes. Uh, 27 scenes in the movie were not in the book. That's how different Benchley's novel was from Spielberg's movie. Spielberg, uh, there was the screenplay that we see now in Jaws was much different than what they planned. They there were different endings, like they killed a shark. How do you kill this big shark? You just can't harpoon it, right? You had to have some sort of a massive ending. And it was Spielberg who came up with the ending of the shark with the oxygen tank between his teeth. And then Chief Brody, shot the oxygen tank, and boom, the shark exploded. All pieces of shark flying around. And Spielberg said he wanted a big, as he called it, a big, rousing ending. Because, there was so much tension during this movie. I mean, that's the thing about it, with not seeing the shark or anything, it got on your nerves. It was like really tense and a lot of jumping scares. So Spielberg wanted the ending, the climax, when the shark got his, uh, he wanted to be really big and sort of like an ending that the audience in the movie theater would stand up and finally be able to breathe and say, "Oh, that's the end of that guy." You know what I mean? All right, so yeah, the famous monologue Robert Shaw did on his own there. Little help about the Indianapolis sinking, but really the most part it was Shaw. Uh, some of the minor roles were given to residents who lived on Martha's Vineyard up there. So all these extras that you see sitting around on the bench and running away from the shark and like looking in and saying, "Shark, shark, shark, shark." Those were all real people. who used to live up there at the time. Okay, so Chief Brody, big role, went to Schneider. And but who else was considered for the role? Robert Duvall was the first person who was offered the role. The great Robert Duvall. He turned it down. I think that was a mistake. Who else was offered the role? Oh, Charlton Heston. You know, Spielberg thought about him and thought he'd probably be pretty good in the role, but then he decided not to offer the role to Heston because he thought Charlton Heston is this big movie star, the guy who's in the Ten Commandments and The Robe, all these big biblical movies. And Spielberg said, I just thought he was too big for the part, you know? To me, I want to get more unknowns. Schneider was kind of unknown. Richard Dreyfuss wasn't very well known. Even Robert Shaw. Robert Shaw was coming off of The Sting. Remember The Sting with Paul Newman and Robert Redford? Great movie. One of my favorite movies. Robert Shaw was coming off of that movie, and they wanted to find the right person to play Quint. So Shaw was offered the role. Well, at first Shaw turned it down because he did read the book and he didn't like the book. And he said, nah. Well, guess what? Shaw's wife and his secretary read the book and they loved it. And they convinced him to go for it and take the role as Quint. And that's how he ended up with the role. Always listen to your wife and your secretary. All right. Schneider was he was offered the role, but Spielberg had his doubts because Schneider was coming off of The French Connection. Remember that movie with Gene Hackman? That was another good movie. And Schneider played a really tough guy in that movie. And Spielberg said, the role of Chief Brody, he's not a tough guy, you know? So we had some doubts about maybe Schneider, but eventually he did. He was glad he did because he was perfect for the role. As far as Quint is concerned, the role of Quint actually was offered to Lee Marvin. Remember Lee Marvin? Another great actor. Turned it down. There was a real life model of Quint. You know, Quint was this very colorful, down to earth, kind of a nasty guy. And there was a guy named Craig Kidsbury who lived up in around Martha's Vineyard. And the character of Quint was role model after this real fisherman who was a shark hunter up there. A real guy. So, and of course, Quint, the role of Quint, Robert Shaw kind of embellished it and kind of put his own signature on the role. The role of Hooper, which led to the hiring of Richard Dreyfuss. Dreyfuss was very well known. Excuse me. Dreyfuss was recommended to Steven Spielberg by George Lucas. George Lucas, Steven Spielberg were friends back then too. And Lucas said, I have this guy, Richard Dreyfuss. He would be perfect for your role. as the scientist, the young, nerdy scientist, the know-it-all. And Spielberg said, okay, before Dreyfus, he was thinking of John Voight, he was thinking of Joel Grey, and he was also thinking of Jeff Bridges as playing Rupert. This is interesting too. Spielberg told the art department in Jaws, no red. If you watch the movie again on TV, or if you go see it on the big screen this summer, notice the first part of the movie, the color red is not used. Why? Because Spielberg wanted the color red to be specifically for the shark, signifying blood, danger. So when you hear the music, that's when you're going to see red. Until then, no red. They actually had 3 mechanical sharks that they brought. They built the sharks in California. One shark had the one side, the left side was all gone. The other shark, the right side was all gone. And the third shark the bottom was all gone, just the head. And like I said, they all had problems with it. The sharks were actually built in California, and they were flown to Massachusetts for the filming. And after Jaws was done, I think 1 or 2 of these mechanical sharks still were around. I think the one was at the Universal Studios. When you go in, there was the mechanical shark. I don't know if it's still there. And the main shark that they used, they nicknamed Bruce. Well, Bruce Sharkstein and the Ocean Street Band. They named it Bruce for whatever reason. Go get Bruce, put Bruce in the water so that he can swallow Quint, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So the boat, Orca, Quint's boat, there were actually 2 orcas during the filming of the movie, Orca 1, Orca 2. And there were so many problems with the filming the movie. Some of the cast started calling the movie Flaws instead of Jaws. You know, the big line there, you're going to need a bigger boat, was actually improvised. It was not in the script. It was not in the script. So what they did was, when that line came up in the movie, it was improvised on the spot. If you remember when it comes up, it's really the first time that we get a good look at Bruce, for sure. And you remember that Brody is shoveling chum from the bucket into the ocean there to try to entice the shark to come closer to the boat. Well, he did that all right, because then the shark rises up and you see the mouth, and that's the kind of Brody goes back, right? And the audience go, because that's really the first time you really see the shark. You see how damn big it is. And that's when Brody goes to the other side of the boat, tells Quint, "You're going to need a bigger boat." And that's when that happens. Well, what happened was, because the original line wasn't said loud enough, they actually had to turn the volume up on that line, because it was drowned out by the engines of the Orca and the waves and all kinds of different noise, the seagulls and whatever. So that particular line, being one of the iconic lines in the whole damn film, they had to kind of isolate that line when they got back to Hollywood to make it stand it. Um, Spielberg, being who he was, uh, attributed a lot of the flaws in the movie to himself. Rightfully or wrong, he thought his experience wasn't good, and Spielberg back in the day was a perfectionist. In other words, everything had to be so his way. For instance, remember that one scene where they come upon, early in the scene, they come upon a boat where these two fishermen did not come back to shore, and they went out at night with the orca and found the two fishermen were deceased, and you see the head bobbing out of the water where the shark tore open the hole in their boat. Um, they filmed that okay, but Spielberg insisted they did it again. They do it again. Why? Because he was too much of a perfectionist. He actually used $30,000 of his own money to go back out there and do it again. Because the studio was saying that it's good enough. Why do you need to go back out there again? Look, Steven, you're already out of way over your budget, over your hours and your days, and you want to go out there just to refilm this because you're not happy with it? Anyway, that's what Spielberg said. He said, looking back on it, I probably was too much of a perfectionist, But he said, if we did not film the movie on the Atlantic Ocean, if we used water tanks and swimming pools back in Hollywood, it wouldn't have looked as good. It wouldn't have been the classic that it is. Okay, what else do we have? Yeah, like I said, out of 12 hours, 12 hours of shooting dedicated to shooting every freaking day. If they got 4 hours of film out of that, they were lucky. So there was just so many problems. Robert Shaw himself, caused a lot of problems. He would go on these binge drinking things. So, Shaw was an alcoholic. And the thing is that it was time for his line went. He may not be on location, but maybe weekends he was always flying to Canada because he had business up there. And then he'd fly back to Martha's Vineyard and do his scenes and fly back. And like I said, there were times when they would go to Robert Shaw to say, okay, you're up, for something, and they'd find him drunk. What the hell? I'm not speaking out of school. It's true. uh, this is really cool. Do you remember the end of the movie where they finally are going to get the shark, right? And they lower Hooper, Richard Dreyfuss, in a cage down into the ocean to try to get a shot at the shark because they don't know how to kill the freaking thing. So they came up with the idea of trying to get close enough to him where they could inject him with a needle full of like some kind of serum or poison to finally kill the damn thing. Well, that was Hooper. But what happened was he saw the shark. He got so scared he never saw anything as big in his life. He got scared. He dropped the gun that had the needle in it. And if you remember, that floated down to the bottom of the ocean. And all of a sudden, he was there with the shark with no protection in the cage. Well, what really happened was that scene with the cage was actually filmed off of the shores of Australia. And a real great white shark proceeded to just destroy that cage. And Spielberg saw the footage of that and said, we got to have this in the movie. That is absolutely terrifying. So what they did was Robert Shaw, they filmed up to a certain point in the Atlantic, cut, put in the part where the shark off of Australia is destroying the cage, cut, go back, and one of the stuntmen took over for Dreyfus, and the script said that he was going to go and hide until everything calmed down. Actually, the original script was Hooper was going to get killed. He was going to get eaten out of that cage. But for some reason, they decided, nah, let's let Hooper live. And but we do want to show the fury of the shark and how powerful he was, how he took that cage and just ripped it to shreds. In order to make their shark look even bigger, they employed a stuntman who was a small guy in that cage. Everything was miniature to make the shark look bigger. So, things worked out, just like in life, things worked out in the end. So with all these mechanical problems that they had and all these problems at sea and what have you, it actually helped because in the long run, as Spielberg recollected, it actually made the script better because they had time. They had time to think about the script and to get it right. And as I said, a lot of the script was improvised. A lot of the script was written the night before they actually shot the scene. So in the long run, Spielberg said it was probably a blessing from God above that we had all these problems because it gave us time to, as they call, polish the script. And it's a damn good script too. I mean, it's flawless. A lot of the people who reviewed the movie back then, and even now, of course, they love Jaws, but there were some problems. They said with before he got to the ocean. Once he got to the ocean, he had all this action going on and all these scares, and then there's just these three fishermen against the shark. That was the meat and potatoes of the script. But when they were back on shore and he had this, that kind of slowed it down, and that got the most bad marks. Listen, so yes, we talked about that. Jaws was originally 55 days to shoot. It took 159 days to actually shoot the damn thing. Couple more things. What they did in that scene that I told you about, where the shark demolishes the cage, a lot of that too was filmed in Hollywood. What they did was Spielberg wanted the water to be very murky. So in a big pool in Hollywood, they dumped powdered milk into the water, which made it kind of murkier, and they put a tarp over the top of the pool to make it look very dark and sinister. So that's how they got around that. Jaws has a great legacy. In fact, as we said, the score, which was by John Williams, that was really like his first real movie. And then after that, he worked with Spielberg a lot. And Williams came up, they said, how did you come up with the and he said, just two notes on the piano. And it was played by a tuba. And really, Williams said, excuse me, Williams said the score was just very intimidating. Again, when you heard the da 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 da, you know there was trouble. And a lot of these scholars and movie guys and critics were trying to say, what was that? Da, 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 da. What was that? The heartbeat of the guy getting killed, or was it the shark, or what? What the hell was it? I think they thought too deeply into it. It is what it was. It was, but whatever. It was just two notes. Da, 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 da. I mean, come on. But that was really the first score for John Williams, and he won an Oscar for the score, by the way. And then he continued to work with Spielberg, probably on almost every Spielberg movie. Close Encounters of the First Kind had a great score. E.T., probably every movie after that. Okay, what do we have here next? So, a lot of critics say Jaws is like Moby Dick, like another Moby Dick. That's the way they equated it to. As we said, the poster became a big draw. Actually, one of the original screens, I gotta tell you, one of the original scripts had it how Quick is introduced into the story. He's in a movie theater watching the movie Moby Dick, and he is laughing like, oh, they can't do it. I'm a better fisherman. I know how to get that whale. Actually, they were going to use that to introduce Quick, but the reason they didn't use that was because of Gregory Peck. Gregory Peck had the movie rights to the movie Moby Dick. And they got a hold of Peck, and they wanted to, get the rights or the permission to use a clip of it, and he would not give permission for whatever reason. So they had to bag that, and they had to go to Plan 2. So when Jaws came out in 1975, it spent 14 weeks at the top in box office. Number one, 14 consecutive weeks. It first ran on 409 screens, which was a big deal back then. The whole movie industry was so much different 50 years ago. A lot of your blockbuster movies, again, would not come out during the summertime. And when they did come out, they would be on limited screens. And then if the movie proved to be a hit, they would increase the screens. Well, Jaws really broke some news there too, because it ran out in shoot 409 screens. The second week, it vaulted up to over 900 screens in the United States alone. And then in December, it finally made its appearance in Great Britain, Europe, and all around the world. Jaws is actually the second franchise, if you could call it, in movie history. If you take what money was worth back in 1975-ish to what it's worth today, Jaws gross would be about $2 billion. Give or take. B as in billion. It ended up, and it still is, Jaws still is the seventh grossing movie of all time. And you know what? I remember Jaws. Again, were you alive when Jaws came out? You know what I remember about Jaws? that summer was just so crazy. I mean, people wouldn't go into the water. That's how it affected people. People were really like, who saw it in the theater, were like really like The Exorcist, you know, were really traumatized. I remember long lines here. It was shown here in my hometown at the historic Colonial Theater. There were long lines going all the way down the block just to get into the movie theater. And that's what it was like all around the country. So it was just a phenomenon. Jaws won 3 Oscars, but not the big one. It won for editing, it won for score, John Williams, and it won for screenplay. But it was nominated for the best film of the year. It lost to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Can you imagine that? Those are your best pictures of the year, 1976. And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Jaws were going hand in hand. You know, talk about two iconic movies. And the thing that kind of pissed Spielberg off, he was not even nominated for Best Director. Not even nominated. I guess maybe because he was a young kid, it was his first real movie. Well, what the hell? He did a great job, as we know from Galileo, looking in the past. And Spielberg kind of carried that with him for a while, you know. Some other things really quickly. Uh, um, yeah, I mean, the legacy of Jaws in the summertime. It just, I mean, look how many movies came after, right? There was Jaws 2 and Jaws 3. They weren't as good as the original Jaws. In fact, we're not going to talk about that. But believe it or not, they actually made money in the runs. They were panned by critics. They weren't good, but people just loved the story of Jaws, and they went to see 2 and 3. One thing that Spielberg regretted was the fact that everybody, after Jaws came out, did have these kind of vigilante fishermen would get into their boats and go shark hunting for real all over the world. And Spielberg said, I feel bad for that because the shark really is it's sort of a beautiful animal. And now it's, protecting the sharks. And he said, because of me, because of Jaws, a lot of sharks out there are getting killed needlessly, He kind of felt bad about it. Again, we're talking about the legacy of Jaws. Out of the 100 best movies of all time, the movie register named Jaws as in number 48. 48 out of 100. Hey, just to make the 100 is really good, The shark was voted, the shark, with all of his problems, the shark was voted number 18, the best villain, number 18 out of under 100 villains in movie history. The quote, "You're going to need a bigger boat," was voted number 35, the best quote in quotes in movie history. The score, music, was voted number 6 in history. Now, final point. Spielberg was asked to come back and direct Jaws 2. And he was thinking about it. What happened was Spielberg was already in production for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he said that this is not going to work. Me trying to wrap up Close Encounters and then trying to do Jaws 2. It's not going to work. So he passed on that. And as we can see, Jaws 2 just wasn't as good, you know. Um, there is a new documentary coming out on National Geographic. You know, this summer, it's Jaws. One of the reasons I'm talking about Jaws today, it's going to be a Jaws summer. The 50th anniversary. Not only are you going to be able to see the original movie on your big screen, but there's going to be all kinds of Jaws celebrations up at Martha Vineyard, all kinds of reminiscing and things, you know. So one of the things you're going to see is National Geographic is going to come out with a documentary about how they made the movie Jaws. So a lot of the things that we've been talking about, you and I, this morning, you're going to see are true in this documentary. The last thing I want to say, do you remember Jaws even on Saturday Night Live? And they called it Land Shark. And it would knock on the door. Gilda Radner, bless her heart, would go to the door and say, "Who is it?" And the shark behind the door would say, "Candy Graham." And it's no Candy Graham, but Land Shark. She would open the door, and the shark's head would come, and she would disappear into his jaws. Final words on Jaws. Well, you know what? Jaws is a kind of movie that, even though you know the ending and you've seen it 1,000 times, if you catch it on TV and you're going around the dials and it's there, you're going to watch it, right? And I really remember. How many times have I caught Jaws on Turner Movie Classics or TNT or one of these cable stations, right? And it's playing, and I'm like, I'm watching it again because you just can't resist the characters. And that's what Steven Spielberg loved about the final script. You got to know these characters, and they became important to you, each one of them. And it, it drew you in. The movie drew you in, especially when they got on the Orca and they went out to kill Jaws. It's like a Godzilla movie or something, you know. So I would stop and watch it. If it comes to our local theater, I might go and see it again on the big screen. Why not? Right? Right? They don't make movies like that anymore. It's a classic. So so that's the thing. It's the type of movie that you want to see again and again and again. Great, great movie. And you know, in 50 years, think about this, my friends. In 50 years, have we had anything similar to Jaws? Think about that. And I'm not just talking about in the ocean, like a giant squid, some Ramsay. I just mean in general. I can't think of it. 50 years. And we've never had a supervillain like Bruce. Hey, well, thank you for tuning in. Sorry it's been a long show, but there's so much to talk about, Jaws. I mean, there's even stuff I left out, you know, about some of these actors who did the big parts in Jaws, their recollection. But we'll probably hear more about that in the documentary coming up. And as I said, we're just starting the summer, and I think we're going to hear more and more about Jaws as the summer goes on. So thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you for watching me. And thank you for taking part in our little celebration of the movie Jaws. 50 years. Peace and love, everybody. Take care. I'll be back sometime soon. And we'll do some more. We'll have some more. Okay? God bless. Take care for now.